Guys, thank you so much for joining us again today on Make It Make Sense with MoniquePressley. I'm your host, and I am really thrilled, especially today, anytime that we can hear from the current administration and get news literally hot off the press, then it's a good day for our show. So it's my pleasure to welcome the United States Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Wally Adeyemo. And there's good news, an announcement from the Vice President today about an action in conjunction with, I believe, 23 other corporations and or organizations in order to better serve underserved communities. So welcome, Deputy Secretary. What can you tell us?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here with you. And as you said, today the Vice President made an important announcement. The Biden-Harris administration have made historic investments in underrepresented communities, Black and Brown communities throughout the country, putting tens of billions of dollars there. But what they know is that because of historic underinvestments, more money is needed. And they think that not only the public sector has to bear some of that burden, it needs to be done by the private sector. So today's announcement was about the fact that more than 23 companies and 3 nonprofits are joining together to make tens of billions of dollars of investments on top of the government's investments in these communities in order to make sure that we create opportunities in underrepresented communities all over the country.
And what are those investments going to look like? Because I don't have to tell you, first of all, I have to be candid. Anytime that I'm doing shows like this and I'm trying to tell people, you can just go to whitehouse.gov and you can see what they're doing every single day in real time. Go to the briefing room and you'll see all of it, because I get those. The administration isn't doing anything for Black people. Biden made all these promises, he's not keeping them. And when things like this happen, I just don't think it gets the maximum amount of exposure in a way that people can understand it. So what is it that these tens of billions of dollars from these 23 plus corporations is going to do?
So it's a great question. I think I hear the same thing that you do when I'm traveling around the country. And I think particularly about a trip I took to Memphis just a few months ago, and I had a chance to sit down with 8 Black women who own small businesses. And the thing they told me was they need access to capital, access to loans, access to equity in order to grow their small businesses, because they're all being successful, but it's hard to find a bank that will give them a loan in their community because there aren't a lot of banks there. So they often need to turn to non-traditional banks like CDFIs or minority-owned depository institutions, Black-owned or brown-owned banks in their communities. One thing that the government has done is that we have put a historic amount of money into those institutions. And we recently announced something we call the State Small Business Credit Initiative, where we've given $10 billion to states that can be invested in those types of small businesses, the types of small businesses owned by these women entrepreneurs. What we've done is we're calling on the private sector to match that 10 to 1. So for every $1 the government puts in, we're asking these private companies and nonprofits, many of whom are included in this coalition, to add $10 to it, so that you go from having $10 billion to $100 billion of available capital to help you start that next store, to invest in capital in your business, so that the businesses that are growing in our communities look like us and are built by us.
Okay, and what's a CDFI? We clean it all the way up here.
So a CDFI is a type of financial institution that is sponsored by the Treasury Department and is often located in underrepresented communities throughout, many of them in the South, many of them in communities that look like us, many in communities where you don't have a traditional large bank. And what they have the ability to do is they are able to make loans, provide financing to your businesses in your communities. You can come to the Treasury Department website to find a list of the CDFIs that exist in your community, but we have—
And what's an MDI?
An MDI is a minority depository institution. So it's a depository institution that's owned by a person of color. And there are too few of them owned in our country. But again, what we've done is that we've made a historic investment in MDIs and CDFIs, providing them with money that they can use to create loans and create other financial products for people who live in these communities. So again, you can build small business, you can get access to a loan to buy a house, so that you have access to the financing that's critical to building opportunity for yourselves, but also for your families.
And I think there's also, just one more question. I think there's also, I know there are lots of other things, but I saw that for people who, for instance, with the American Rescue Plan, received funds and receive funds through these other means, it's one thing to get the money, that's hard enough, that's a first level to reach, and then to accurately and responsibly know what to do with it. Aren't there funds being devoted to that education?
There is money and resources being devoted to helping people better understand how to use their financial resources to build opportunity for themselves, which is a critical thing. I think one of the challenges that you have when you're a small business person is that you're really good at the thing that you do, but that doesn't mean that you have an MBA in finance. So you need somebody who can help you think through, how do you build a financial plan in order to make sure that you can grow your business over time? There's money devoted to this already that the government has put in place. We've also put in place systems to do this. But the key thing that we know is that government alone can't do this. It needs to be done in collaboration and coordination with the private sector and with nonprofits. And I think oftentimes the challenge is that different government agencies are doing different things. One thing the vice president and the president have called us to do is to, as a government, come together to have one strategy around how we engage the private sector in matching our funding, which you're going to see through this program. But in addition to doing that, we want to make sure that the private sector is doing the things that we think has the best impact in these underrepresented communities, like putting money into small businesses that are owned by us, that look like us, that are hiring people in these communities, but also putting money into financial institutions that are actually serving you in your community as well.
Well, this all sounds like good news, and it sounds much needed. How can people find out more?
So I'd recommend, again, to your point, going to the White House website, where there's a fact sheet that provides a bunch of information about these programs and also information about what the investments that the Biden administration is making in these communities. And then I think the other thing that I'd recommend is that you engage with your local officials, because I think one of the things that is critical for us is that this isn't something that we want to do in your communities. It's something we want to do with you in your communities. And I think doing it together with the people who are on the ground and making sure that these resources are going to the places that you think that they are needed is going to be an important part of this. So expect to see people like me visiting to talk to you about how we deploy these resources going forward. But I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come on your show to help provide some information about some of the important work the Biden-Harris administration is attempting to do to make sure that we grow parts of our economy that both deserve these resources, but also by getting these resources have the ability to help grow our entire economy.
Yeah, well, that's all good news, and I appreciate it. And you are welcome here anytime, Deputy Secretary. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Take care.